Yes, thank you, Julian. I've got to say that we are the main free market think tank in Italy, and we are also the only one, which makes us a free market monopolist. Now, I fear my speech today will be very much boring for you for two reasons. First one is that English is not my mother tongue. You know, English is like my wife. I can barely understand it, and I certainly cannot master it. And the second reason is that basically already Gabriele has already said whatever I could say. What I want to tell you is the result of a study we as Istituto Bruno Leoni did on the green jobs experience in Italy, which basically follows the lines of Gabriele's own study. We decided to use the same methodology as himself in order to make a comparable study and to see whether there were differences, whether our policies were better or not than the Spanish ones, and so forth. The starting point is that obviously incentives to renewable industry, renewable energies, create jobs. If you throw money at whatever industry, you can be sure that that industry will create some jobs. The point is that how many jobs will be created and what kind of jobs will be created. Our study is mostly concerned about how many jobs. As far as the kind of jobs that are created, Gabriele already told that most of them, at least 60%, I would say in Italy at least 70%, will be installers. Obviously, there is a huge problem when you define what is a green job. As you will see, we started from existing estimates. We didn't produce our own estimate, as Gabriele didn't produce his own estimate of today's green jobs. We started from existing estimates of the green jobs. And you will see a huge variability. And the variability can be explained looking at how you define a green job. If a green job is the guy who goes and installs a photovoltaic panel or a wind turbine, you are likely to stay on the lower end of the existing estimate or even below that. If instead by green job you define not just the installer, but also the waiter who serves the coffee to the installer, and the babysitter of the waiter's son, and the journalists of the newspaper the babysitter reads, and the think tank people quoted in the newspaper, then even you and I are green workers. Which makes up for 100% of the employment in society, and so in that respect, green jobs are great. Now, in my slides, I've got a few information about the experience with green jobs and green subsidies in other European countries. I will just call your attention on the case of Denmark, because that's very much interesting. In Denmark, they've got a huge wind capacity. Now, wind power is a wonderful thing, which has the bad feature of producing energy when the wind blows, and not when you want energy. So what happens is that wind usually blows when you don't want energy, and the energy is very hard to store. So what the Danish do is to subsidize the wind power, which they cannot consume. However, they are very well interconnected with the Scandinavian countries. And so they sell very cheap energy to the Scandinavians because there is oversupply in that moment. And the Scandinavians have a large hydropower capacity, so they can store energy by pumping water up into the dams. Then it comes the day, and the Danish start to work. And they realize they need power, and the wind is not blowing. So they look around and buy hydropower from the Scandinavians. The net result from this is that in 2008, the Danish exported almost 1 billion of subsidies to the Scandinavians, who were kind enough to resell their own energy the day after. In Germany is a relatively successful country as far as renewable industry is concerned, and the main reason there is some evidence and even some literature in the peer-reviewed journal is that Germans have the advantage of the first mover in a way. They had a great industry in producing wind turbines and solar photovoltaic, and they were smart enough to force all of the other European countries to buy their own technology. So they have been probably successful until a couple of years ago, It's a kind of mafia style of making business. I mean, I force you to buy my own technology, and then I say, hey, God, I'm making a lot of money by selling this. And this is another proof that the European Union is actually about the Europe joining Germany instead of the other way around. I will not speak about Spain because Gabriel told everything you need to know. I will now speak about Italy by giving you some context information, and then I will briefly speak about our study. First of all, for big industrial user, Italy is the country where electricity is the most expensive. This graph is from the European Union. I'm referring to the big industrial users because I've got to disclose that our study was funded by a consortium of huge electricity consumers. So not big oil, not utilities, not anybody else, just somebody who wanted to understand the impact of the green policies on their electricity bill. These are the numbers of existing green jobs in Italy according to different estimates. Most of them are public organizations. I spoke to you about huge uncertainties. With solar power, you've got estimates that range between 5,700 to 15,000, again, depending on whether or not you include the waiter in the green jobs count. And with wind power, you've got estimates that range between 17,000 to 28,000. We took all of these estimates as truth, and we built basically two different scenarios, an optimistic scenario, so to speak, and the pessimistic scenario. Then we tried to estimate the amount of subsidies that have been given to the renewable industry, and particularly wind and solar industries. And we found that in 2008, the wind power basically got around 500 million in subsidies, while they produced energy for a value of around, let's say, 200 million. That means that for every euro of market value of the energy they produced, they got 2 euros in subsidies, while the solar industry got like 100 million euros in subsidies. And here the ratio is very funny. For every euro in value of the energy they produced, they got around 6 euros in subsidies, which is a great way of making money, I think. Finally, we assume the target as far as the capacity, the renewable capacity is concerned that will be installed until 2020. In order to pick the correct target, we picked what the Italian government in 2007 said was the maximum potential for wind power and solar power. At that time, the environmental minister was also the leader of the Italian Green Party. So if there is a bias, it's not on our side. This is the same graph for solar power. Now, here you can see basically the results of our studies. The green line is the amount of subsidies that have been committed to solar power here and wind power here. You see that it will peak in 2020, and after it will decrease. The reason is that we just wanted to look at the capacity at 2020, which is a sort of symbolic here for the European Union policies. If you sum the subsidies that have been committed to solar and wind power, we found that in 2020, in aggregate, they will be given 6 billion of euros per year. And over the entire time horizon we are looking to, we have estimated an amount of like around 30 billion euros in 30 years' time, basically as much as Spain has committed to its renewable industry. The blue lines are the number of jobs that we estimated in the optimistic scenario, and the red lines are the number of jobs that we estimated in the pessimistic scenario. If you sum wind power and solar power, we found that the number of jobs that will be created will be around between 50,000 in the pessimistic scenario and 112,000 in the optimistic scenario. To give you an idea, to create this amount of job, I said it has been committed around 6 billion per year in 2020. 6 billion per year is about 0.5% of Italian GDP. And with the same amount of money, you could fund like 6,000 Istituto Bruno Leonis with the creation of 60,000 jobs. And real jobs there is, I mean, no doubt about who does what. Now, is it all of this, is it efficient? Is it an efficient way to create jobs, or is it not an efficient way to create jobs? What we did is to measure, to estimate the average stock of capital per any worker, and to compare it with the average stock of capital in the general economy and in the industrial sector. If you compare it with the whole economy, what we found is that for every green job, I mean, if you give the same amount of money to the whole economy, for example, by cutting down the premiums that every electricity consumer in Italy pays on his electricity bill, for every single green job, 4.8 jobs would be created in the economy. If you compare it to the industrial sector, which is meaningful because the industrial sector is the one that will pay the highest bill on its electricity production, for every single green job, 6.9 dirty jobs would be created. So that took us to draw two basic conclusions. First conclusion is what was obvious in advance, basically. That is, that the renewable industry is a capital-intensive industry, not a labor-intensive industry. This is not a problem per se. There are wonderful capital-intensive industries around. The problem is that usually capital-intensive industries don't ask for subsidies in order to create jobs, which is not their job, so to speak. And the second conclusion is that this helped us to define a fourth way of wasting money that adds to the three already known. There used to be three ways for wasting money. The first one, and the easiest, is with horses. The second one, and the most funny, is with women. The third one, and the most secure, is with politicians. And the fourth one, and the most costly, is with renewable sources of energy. Thank you.